Hello, everyone. This is Andrew Carvajal, and welcome to another installment of the Alpin Academy. In this video, we're going to be talking about ties to home country. So, a very important factor in the legal test to obtain any kind of temporary residence, which includes study permits. And we'll talk about what are some of the important factors that are considered by immigration officers in assessing a study permit application. This is a segment that I have pulled from a 2024 course on study permits. And let's just get right to it.
Okay, so purpose of study plan, right? Funds, very objective, money, we need to show. Now let's go to the other very subjective part of the legal test, which unfortunately also it's very open to interpretation, and it's also a very common reason for refusal. Ties to home country. Now, the one thing about ties to home country that I would say is that none of these factors are determinative. Because you have family in Canada, because you're unemployed, because you haven't traveled. Any of them on their own, in theory, I mean, the unemployed, I mean, I think that one is a tough one, like no employment. By unemployed, I don't mean like a 18-year-old. I mean like someone who really doesn't have good financial stability. But things like family members, whether you have assets or not, whether you have had visa refusals or not, whether you have a good travel history or not. I think that all of those on their own, they're not determinative of ties to home country. But some factors are positive, some factors are negative, some factors are simply neutral. And we'll take a look at how the courts mention how some of them are simply neutral. But if you have a couple of negative ones, that's where you basically start having problems. And yeah, so very case specific, no two cases where we would address the same. And my strategy is always, okay, let's focus on what's strong. And also depending on how risky this application is, do I need to really prove this, or do I need to really just claim it? So for instance, in most cases, I don't prove that people have family in their home country. I don't go and get evidence of where they live, where their parents live, and their birth certificates and things like that. I just simply, in the family information form, they'll see where their family lives. But if it's someone who's coming alone, their spouse is staying in their home country, or their children are staying in their home country, then I do tend to include in those cases marriage certificates, birth certificates showing that they have family that lives there. Okay. So let's go through some of this, and then we'll talk about the case law. So non-accompanying family. I mean, if most of your close family is in your home country, that's a positive factor. If most of your family is in Canada, so let's say, for instance, you're coming to study in Canada and your grandparents, your parents, your siblings live in Canada, doesn't mean that you're not going to leave Canada voluntarily. I mean, you could show excellent travel, you could show a lot of other things, but it's already kind of like, ooh, an officer knows that push comes to shove, you might decide to stay in Canada. So it's not great facts in terms of family members, but it's not determinative at all. Same thing, I've seen a number of refusals that come from people who don't have family in Canada. They might have their parents and siblings in their home country, but they're going with their spouse and children to Canada. And then officers tend to say, oh, well, because of your family ties to your home country, we're refusing this. And I think that is unreasonable. And I think if that's the main purpose of refusal, challenge it. Because the fact that you're going with your family members doesn't mean that you don't have ties to your home country. And most importantly, the fact never, and this is another ethical issue, and people may have different approaches, I never lie about the intention of a student with their family. Some people in our industry think that it's a strategy to say that someone's going alone to study only to apply for the spousal work permit and children's study permit as soon as the application is approved. And guess what? Sometimes, not always, but sometimes happen with those applications. They say, well, you lied to us. And they could get refusals on those applications. So I asked someone, are you coming alone or are you coming with your spouse? The plan is to come with my spouse and children. Go with your spouse and children. The plan is to eventually have my family join me, but my spouse needs to finish a job project which takes another year, or my children, they need to be in school. We want them to only come to Canada once they finish their elementary school, and that's not for another year. Okay, in that case, I feel comfortable saying that you're going alone. And then whenever it's the time to apply for their permits. But don't lie about it just for the sake of thinking that you make the application stronger. Assets, I mean, if they're there, document them, but most clients don't have assets. So sometimes I have clients that say, oh, well, my mom is thinking of transferring her property to my name for the study permit application. I'm like, don't do that. I mean, that's not, first of all, I mean, that you're obviously, it's fraudulent what you're doing. And there's no reason why you should do it. I mean, the fact that you don't have assets is neutral. It's not a negative factor. And obviously for people who are young, it's expected for them to not have assets, but some people who might be older, they don't have assets, they don't have assets. But if they do have assets, document them. And there's different ways to do it. Sometimes we do property titles, but sometimes in some countries where the main language is a different language other than English or French, translating a property title might be like 20-page document, but there's tax documents from the property. So the tax documents they need to pay every year, which might be 1 or 2 pages. Let's translate that one because that one shows who the owner is, where the property is, and the value of the property. Educational history in their home country, that's helpful. Educational history in other countries, they've traveled to other countries, they've studied in other countries, they've left other countries, that's helpful. This one is, I would say, is more not as important, but obviously the education history might be important to the study plan. Employment history, for me, this is a crucial one, but again, it depends on the client. Would it be normal for someone who's 18, 19, 20 to have employment history? No. Would it be a bad thing that someone who just graduated from their undergrad and is now applying to do post-secondary studies or postgraduate studies not to have work history? No, in many countries, some people just in their undergrad, they just study and that's it. But someone who's graduated from their undergrad and who's 30 something and they have very poor employment history, they're currently unemployed, but not only currently unemployed, they've been unemployed for a period of time, or underemployment. For instance, they graduated as a lawyer, but they've been working on customer service for the last 6 years. Those are challenging ones. I find that of all of these ones, that's one that could really be determinative, especially as you're creating that. But you could have someone who graduated as a lawyer, has been working in finance for the last few years, now is coming to do like a finance-based degree in Canada. Well, that's fine. I mean, they have, even though the employment hasn't been in their field of study, it's obviously a well-remunerated employment and they have good financial opportunities there. So I think of all of these ones, this is an important one. If there are scholarships requiring return to home country, we'll include them, but I mean, most clients don't have them. Travel history. Should I go travel to different countries because I'm planning to apply for a study permit? No. If you don't have travel history, it's neutral. If you have it, let's document it. If you've applied for visas and they've been approved, excellent. Let's prove that. If you had refusals, it's not determinative, but we'll have to declare them. And if you had a lot of refusals, well, it's going to be a challenging application. If you had a lot of refusals to Canada, it's going to be challenging. If you had a refusal for a visitor visa 2 months ago, and now you're applying for a study permit, it looks like you're just trying to change the reason to come just so that you can get into Canada. So these things are important. Are you in a country where you're about to lose status? So let's say you had a study permit or a work permit that's about to expire and your country of origin is a country where you haven't been to in many years. I mean, those are all factors that make some cases easy or difficult. And we're not magicians, because sometimes I get a lot of junior lawyers or consultants who say, well, what should I do? Because this person has all their family in Canada. It's just like, what can you do? You can't eradicate these people. You can't just make up that they don't exist. Focus on the things that are helpful. Well, my client has all their family in Canada. They've had 3 prior visa refusals and they're unemployed. Well, I mean, tell your client they're not going to get a study permit. And that, I mean, they could pay you to try to do it, but most likely it's going to be refused. So we're not magicians. We can't change the facts, but we can work with the facts that are helpful. And I've had so many clients sometimes get refusals based on ties to home country. And I asked them, did you include proof of your assets? No. You own a business. Did you include proof that you own a business? No. Did you include employment history, job letters? No. Well, so obviously the officer didn't have much to work with there. Document everything that you can. Employment history, pay particular attention. I like to document employment history well. If they've been at the current job for many years, that might be it. But if they've been at various jobs that are good to the application, I like to document them. And I do the same with the spouse if the spouse is accompanying.
Thank you for watching. If you want to continue learning, be sure to explore the full range of resources available to immigration and legal practitioners through the Alpin Academy and Alpin's CPD courses. Visit alpin.ca/academy to access the entire library of practical on-demand content.